Take you back to one of our leading stories now, and we continue with our coverage on the developing story that is Stilfontein in the northwest. Government confirming that more than 1,200 miners have resurfaced from the disused Stilfontein mine without government's help. The province's safety MEC saying this is an indication that the illegal miners are not trapped. Earlier today, the High Court in Pretoria also dismissing an application for emergency humanitarian relief for illegal miners at that mine. Lobby group, the Society for the Protection of Our Constitution, approaching the court 2 weeks ago, you'll remember, accusing the government of being heavy-handed with illegal miners in the northwest. For reaction to this now, I'm joined by the Saftu General Secretary, Zwelinzima Vavi, who warned just a few days ago that these miners might die a slow death if they are not assisted. Mr. Vavi, good afternoon to you and thank you for your time. Do your statements last week change at all given what happened overnight?
Not at all, and I wonder whether the public in South Africa will appreciate that the mine has many shafts. The point of departure when I make that statement was the shaft 11, where mine workers, artisan miners, whatever you want to call them, zamazamas, were about 2 kilometers underground, where the structure that they were using before was removed, and which then had no option of receiving food or water because the colleagues that used to be able to operate that structure were now removed from the vicinity of the shaft.
Yeah.
As a result of the interim court order that was secured by the NGO that regrettably nobody knows, that had not consulted with the artisan or community of Kuma and Stilfontein, that on the basis of hearing that there is a development that can lead to a tragedy, moved to approach the court and secured an interim order. And today, that interim order has been defeated in court. It's not in place.
Yeah.
We regarded that interim court order only as having been some kind of a setback, in that even though it was launched by the NGO that sought to strengthen the hand of the artisan mine workers were in the underground, but it only achieved to get the state to remove even the makeshift structure that was there, to remove all of the community members, volunteers who were using that makeshift structure to get the workers off underground into the surface. That's what it achieved. So it is immaterial from where we stand now because, as you know, the government has since launched an operation to get those workers out from that shaft.
Mr. Vavi,
that I'm meeting of the National Executive Committee now. I don't know what has happened today, but the promise was that today they will go down and get more workers out of the underground.
Well, let me quickly brief you, and two elements stand out about what happened overnight. These illegal miners, they came up to the surface. 14 of them came out ultimately, while others, the police tell us that when they noticed that police were on site, they went back underground. The ones that have come up, they tell a story of some people being held against their will down there, and that some people are so weak physically that they are not so sure whether they are going to make it, and that even the food that was sent down there, it may have been confiscated by those who wield power down there. Surely that changes the complexion of sympathy, if you want to call it that, that these people have enjoyed thus far, to say that, one, if they can come up on their own, unassisted, surely these are not people who are trapped. But number two, there are those that are being held against their will down there. So these are criminals. Is that not clear enough?
No, Vuyo, I'm sorry, Goli. A criminal is the fellow that has been convicted in court and so declared as a criminal. Me and you, using information from the second hand, will always second guess in terms of what is happening. And let me again draw the picture. We are told, and we were on the ground, that it was always possible for some workers who are working from other shafts to use, in particular, shaft 5 at Margaret shaft in Stilfontein to come out. There are many workers in those unused, abandoned mines. Some of them are on shaft 11, which is the point that we were referring to when we spoke to you. Others are all over. It is estimated that there are between 30,000 to 100,000 workers or artisan miners or zamazamas all over underground in South Africa.
Does it matter, Mr. Vavi?
The story about one shaft, Goli, may not apply to a story in another shaft.
Yeah.
We were referring to shaft number 11, where there was a structure, where there were people underground, where there was an attempt to get food underground and water, which stopped since Saturday. And that's what we were referring to when we said, if there is no emergency, very soon, those artisan miners will die a slow death. So don't mix the information. Shaft 10 and shaft 11 are totally different to shaft 11 where we were.
Okay. The right to life is guaranteed in our constitution. That's the supreme law of the land. However, you have people in the majority who are foreign nationals, and we're told by the authorities that these are people who, as soon as they come out, they're being processed. And so far, the majority tells us that, or the majority, as the information comes, it suggests that these are people who are in South Africa illegally and therefore having broken the Immigration Act. How far should the sympathy of South Africans go towards these people when the very people that were underground who have just surfaced are saying some of them are holding our fellow brothers against their will?
Let me start here, Goli. We've always stated that the industry that is unregulated, taking advantage of abandoned mines, ownerless mines, have been infiltrated by all manner of characters in society, including the criminal element. There are criminals, allegedly, who are there taking full advantage of the levels of poverty in parts of the Eastern Cape, Lesotho, Mozambique, and Malawi. And these criminals extort money, abuse the desperation of these workers from the poverty-stricken areas of the Southern Africa in order to make quick buck for themselves as they trade in the black market and as they trade in the illicit mineral markets all over the world. There are businesses, we suspect, even the former owners of those mines who are back operating there, who are taking full advantage of this unregulated environment they find.
Okay.
And there are ordinary workers who have been recruited back to work as subcontracted workers, working for some of them, these criminals, some of them, these underworld, that is operating in this sector, which is unregulated. So it's given that the stories the workers are telling, that they have been held against their will and that their food has been compensated may just be true. That's the first point.
All
the
right.
second point is that indeed, these workers are coming from the region. They're coming from the Eastern Cape. They're coming from Lesotho, Mozambique and Malawi. And they are desperate. They used to be mine workers, some of them, and they have been lured into coming back into this unregulated industry. And thanks to the porous borders of South Africa, they are finding their way in without anyone stopping them to ask them any kind of documentation. Now, these levels of desperation of these former mine workers in the underground are being exploited, and we have always said that point. They are being exploited to the extreme by these notorious criminals operating as the owners of illegal owners of these shafts that have been abandoned.
Mr.
So
Vavi.
who to blame? In our view, the government must be blamed for allowing anybody who wishes to come to South Africa without papers to come to do so.
Okay.
Secondly, government that must be blamed for not forcing the mining industry to, when closing these mines, seal the shafts and all of the tunnels to make it impossible rather, for anyone to come back and mine without the permission of the government.
Okay,
And
Mr. Vavi.
it is the fault of the government not to regulate the industry that is turning 5 to 21 billion rands every year.
Okay.
And so begin to talk about the workers who are finding themselves victim of the uncaring state and unscrupulous bosses taking advantage of their desperation.
Mr. Vavi, thank you very much for your time. And yeah, that's where we're going to leave this conversation. There's much to take away from what is developing at Stilfontein.